Well, since none of you could hear me, let's try this again. Today is Tuesday, December 1st. This is the study session of the Litchfield Elementary School Governing Board. Before we get started this evening, I want to make an introduction. Although you can't see him on your Zoom screen, our newly elected governing board member who will start in January, Mr. Jeremy Honak, is here in the audience with us tonight. He's just watching, learning, listening, and getting into the groove of things. So welcome, Jeremy. Thank you for joining us. And he will be joining us in his official capacity in our January 2021 meeting. Moving on to our data and assessment presentation from Brian Owen. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board and superintendent, again, welcome, Mr. Honak. We wanted to just take this opportunity to give you a lowdown about some of the data that we just collected. We just did the district-wide benchmark assessment in grades 3 through 8 in math and reading, and some of this is the results of that assessment. So I'm Brian Owen, Director of Assessment for the Litchfield District. That's actually not my real title, but I don't know my official title. I want to start just by giving you an idea of what the assessment department's mission and vision are. I can just read this. Our mission is to provide the highest quality district assessments, data, and academic achievement information to all district staff. And we'll accomplish this by ensuring alignment, providing highest quality data, and delivering the most informative measures. This is how it aligns to our strategic plan in the 4 pillars. Under student success, to administer high quality assessments. Under people, for employees to feel connected and valued, recruit and include teachers and staff. Under service, conduct and provide a wide variety of data analyses, and then in resources by evaluating and continuing to improve. This is continuously analyze district assessments. Throughout this presentation, I'll touch on, at least to some extent, the work we're doing in each of these 4 areas. Quick overview of our district assessments this year. We will administer, well, we're planning to administer 3 math assessments in grades 3 through 8, online, and 3 reading assessments. They've been both in person and remotely. Special thanks to technology for making that happen. This is the first time that we've ever done that with this system and with these tests. So the first thing I want to get into is how we revise and create assessments. This is aligned to pillar 4. And I just want to kind of give you an idea of what one of these revision processes looks like. So you know how we analyze and continually try to improve them. We get teams of teachers and instructional coaches, usually 2 to 3 per grade level. And then we have a whole bunch of resources available for them to use. Like they can see the current assessment, they get standards, district maps where appropriate, item crosswalks, answer keys, item descriptors, and then some quantitative analyses that I'll go through. And then of course, any available items. So the first quantitative analysis that they get, or they can see, is what we call p-values. This is the percent of students that answers each item correct. And what we're looking for here are particularly low or high p-values. The low p-value means a low percentage of students answer that correct. High p-value means a very high percentage did. And what I do is I just highlight them. And while they go through the test, item by item, these are the ones I want them to pay special attention to. And then the second thing we give them are correlations. And what I do here is I look at the items that have particularly high correlations and particularly low, and then some that are just okay. The high correlations are strong items. So I want them to pay attention to those and the concepts that are assessed by those items, because according to the correlation with the state assessment, those are important concepts. The extremely low ones, especially when we have a negative one, which is rare, we want them to look to revise them or remove them. I have a statistical package that I use, SPSS. So I match the students' scores, their benchmark scores, to the state scores. And then I run a process. It's just a, but and it runs it for me. And just to give you an idea about how effective this process can be, this is the correlations to the state assessment. Now, the last state assessment we had was in 2019. This is from the 2018-19 school year. These are 2 math assessments during the year, and then this is the end of your math assessment. This one, you can see this math formative one has lower correlations. So this test we determined was not as an effective test as we wanted it to be. That test actually went away after the school year. But you can see how high some of these correlations are. Actually, these are some of the highest correlations that I've ever worked with at the district. So that's how things work during these revision sessions. Traditionally, they have been in person. So we would have like 2 to 3 grade level teams, 2 to 3 people. I was one instructional coach to come in too. They come into a room, we hand them a packet of all the resources, and then they get to work. This year, of course, was a little different. So everything was done remotely. And I want to go through what we did this year to prepare. Yes, ma'am.
So when I look at like back a little bit just to the resources, like this list of starting points to reading out, would it be true? So it says the most current state standard was revised in 2016. So is it true that basically since we got those standards and until those standards are revised again, we're really just perfecting this process and getting closer and closer to where we should be as far as the correlation goes?
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We want these to be the most effective assessments that possible, that give us the most information possible. You're welcome. So yes, in a standards revision, what would happen is we revise the test to align with the new standards as best as possible. And then, of course, after we get the state assessment result, that will get recorrelated so we can see how close we were.
And is that actually then what we see happening is our correlations are getting closer and closer because our tests are getting better and better?
Yes.
Okay.
So what they'll do is they'll actually go item by item. So item 1, and the first thing to do is look at the standard. What's the intent and expectation of the standard? Does this item measure that? And then they make a decision. And then they look at the metrics. So if it's has a low or high p-value, they ask, well, how come so few students are answering this item correctly? If it's below 33%, to me, that means the majority of students are guessing. And so what I want to know is that true? Now, there might not be anything wrong with the items. That might be perfectly fine with just the way that the metrics come out. So for this year, we needed to do a couple different things. The benchmark assessment analyses that you just looked at are the full benchmark assessments. Those are 55 to 60 item assessments in both math and reading. Reading has, I don't know, somewhere around 12 or 13 reading passages. But what we needed to do was shorten them because those were 2 to 2.5 hour test windows. And it just became very clear that students, when they returned, would come back in a limited capacity. So we wanted them to spend less time testing and more time learning. So what we did is we selected the most highly correlated items from the last analysis. Oh, and the other thing we did too is we took away a few district assessments. So these benchmarks in K2 will not be administered this year. Those are paper assessments. And they were not modified. So only math and reading grades 3 through 8. So the science assessment and PE assessment we're not administering this year. So this is what the test calendar currently looks like. You just look at this. The next data point will be reading, hopefully, at the end of January. It's making me a little nervous with the latest closure. And then we'll have another math data point in February, and then the final data points at the end of the year after the state test.
Are you expecting the state test also make those adjustments in the number of questions? Or is that just what we're doing?
That's just what we're doing. I don't know. I don't think that that's fine right now.
Can you tell me again what you said about the K through 2? What was in the K through 2?
K2 will see dibbles. And then there are other common formative assessments, and we have other online programs that we bought on to assess and administer assessments.
Article framework, does Wonders have a program?
Wonders does have assessments, right? Yes. So now that we have this data, this is the part I want to talk about what we're doing with it and what we do with the data as we get it throughout the year also. So right now, whether there are some analyses in place, and I just want to show you the summary. You do have the full benchmark summary in the folder there that breaks it down by school and grade and district and grade. And as you can see, this is average percent correct. The, I guess, grayish bar is the most recent assessment in October, November 2020. The other two comparison bars are those 30 items that were selected. I reorganized those tests to just include those 30 items for comparison. And as you can see, scores are higher, which we would expect them to be higher, particularly in math, because first quarter is over. But reading actually surprised me a little bit. I was surprised at how much higher the reading scores were. I didn't expect that. I have a theory though, and I've run this by a couple people and they think it's pretty plausible. This shortened assessment is only half the items. So I think what we might be seeing here with the lower scores is just assessment fatigue. I think.
How much of the data frame they normally do this in September, let's say, or November, understanding that granted this year is different. I wouldn't say we have a full 2 months of learning time because we were in school, it's a little different. How much do you expect those scores to change in a typical year and then compared to this?
Well, that's kind of the nuance of this because it's a new assessment. So students have not, they've taken these items before, but they have not taken these assessments and they haven't taken them at this time. And we've never given another assessment twice in that time period to be able to compare. So that we do see that they're higher, but the issue is we can't answer the question, how much higher should they be?
So then, when you say assessment fatigue, you mean the length of the normal test, the 2-hour versus this being a shorter number of questions, or just
It
the
could
amount
be.
of time to assess?
Well, that could be it too, because the full length benchmarks are taking the first 3 weeks of the school year. So this reading test comes week 3. So students have already tested for 2 weeks. Plus it's a very long assessment. And every one of these tests have passages and items either that take place later or at the end of that full benchmark. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with the change in score that we're seeing. I don't know for sure.
Could it also be that since we're teaching the critical standards as opposed to all the standards, and then we're really testing on the critical standards as opposed to all the standards, and we're really just honing in our teaching to include fewer items, and so we expect the scores to be higher?
I don't know exactly, but I do, a little bit later in the presentation, I do want to talk about that a little bit. So this is percent correct on the test, just a summary on the test that we just saw. I want to get into some of the analyses that we would typically run. The first set I want to look at are just subgroups from this data. And the first 2 slides I'm going to show are not for our district test. They're from the latest spring 19 AU merit results. And this is how, now all I did was take the public file and put together a percent proficient in each. This is by ethnicity. These are the 3 most represented ethnicities. And just selected outbreaks 3 through 8 for the unifieds and then compared them to districts that we would commonly compare to. So mostly West Valley districts, a couple downtown, a couple east side. This is how math breaks down. I like to look at this as a perspective. in addition to looking at how our different ethnic groups compare to each other. This gives me a little more context.
Brian, what would your assessment be on this data? Your overall, how would you summarize this?
Well, I would say Litchfield is at or very near many other districts that we tend to compare to in both ELA and math in all three subgroups in terms of proficiency.
It's like in the top three across the board on both of those, really.
And there are plenty of other districts we could have included, but we just ran out of room. So there's the state proficiency context. Now I'm going to get into the test that we just took and what the average percent correct looks like across the ethnic groups. Now, this is all grades 3 through 8. So you've got reading over here on the left, math on the right. So this is not proficiency. Yes, this is the test that we just got data back.
And this is testing what they should know by the end of the year.
Yes, I would say that because we blueprinted these tests first. So they're blueprinted toward the state blueprint, and we just selected items that were highly correlated in each of the categories. So there are fewer items that measure each concept.
Right.
But yes, there are concepts that represent the whole grade level. And then we ran just a couple other subgroups. Gender is not a subgroup I typically look at in terms of academic data, but in the spirit of looking at other subgroups, I decided to go ahead and put it in. You can see they're very close. This is, again, overall, all students 3 through 8. This is a slide by disability, so special education students and non-special education students in math and reading, regardless of disability, whether there's an IEP.
Was there any mention from the SPED team that they really appreciated the smaller, shorter test?
You know, no, there should have been.
Right, man.
I know. Well, I mean, I definitely did get some thank yous for sure. That the assessments, they were not intended to last more than an hour. And so, of course, some students did take more than an hour, but.
Yeah, well, it's really nice because it also gives them the opportunity for the extended time on their services as opposed to having to push it every day.
Yeah, exactly.
All of that. Brian, do you have any of this data with the SPED and the master's and ELL in comparison to other districts with those same subgroups?
I don't in this presentation, but I can look at that. That stuff
I'm
is.
just interested to see, as we start to break down these subgroups, I think there's really interesting things to learn from our own districts, and I think comparing them like we did, break down the ELA and math with other folks that have similar communities to ours, it would be interesting to see how the subgroups start to compare across the board.
That is certainly something that I can look at. Not all the districts will have reported data, though, is the only thing, because when you get into some of the smaller represented subgroups, the N count is so low, they don't report for those reasons. But yes, these are accountability subgroups, so special ed, low income, and ELO can be done in the public file. I can work on that.
And you said, what did you say? The ELL and
Low income.
okay, so is that just based off of,
Free reduced or some other federally subsidized plan.
the report, federally reported somehow?
Yes. Yep. I don't have low income here because that's not readily accessible to me. It's so protected. There's just a paperwork process that we have to go through. But if we want to look at it with our data, I can certainly get that moving.
I just think that would be great to see this something clear, because we talk about them, we have budget items, we have, specific, programs targeting age groups, and it would be nice to see, over a period of time, if the things that we do deal or not, we start to do not, just looking down at this level, and then they can know we have
That's one of the things we do is just summarize. So as soon as I get enough data records to be able to analyze, process, I get the summaries together and get them out to the schools and our district admin as quickly as possible. These are the summary results. What we're looking at right now, though, is something a little different. And this is not something that we've looked at like this before. And what we're trying to do is explore, do we see learning gaps this year? And the way that I set it up was I looked at how students scored on certain items that measure concepts in August in the past, and how students are scoring on those same items and concepts now at the end of October, beginning of November. And the reason I just took this as an example, that last week with the instructional coaches, we looked at this for every grade level, both math and reading. What struck me about this one is the large gap here between August 2019 and October, November 2020. So when I posed this to the instructional coaches last week, we wanted to look at why. This is the standard, it's a geometry standard, it's a supporting standard, so it's not critical or essential. But what struck me about it is it's not taught in third grade until the fourth quarter. So third graders in August would not have received third grade instruction in my concept. And students in October, November still wouldn't have. So why do I see such a large difference? To me, that says students in this area came into third grade in the past with something that students didn't come into this year. So, here's the other thing that struck me too, was this was one of the highly correlated standards that has a kind of a moderate to high correlation here with the state test of 0.357. So that told me this is an important concept in third grade to be taught in fourth quarter and be a supporting standard. But explicitly, what we think, and after we discussed it, we think that this particular concept is important to other things in third grade. Not just recognizing groups of shapes. So probably things like perimeter area, other concepts. And then what we found was because students this year didn't get something that students last year did, we look back at second grade. This is a very similar standard, kind of the basis for the third grade GA standard, and it's taught in the fourth quarter, which of course started the day of the closures last year. So this is the process we went through. There were very few of these, and actually this was kind of the one example that just jumped out at me. Grades 4 and 7 had a few, like 3 or 4 different ones, and we think that's because of the strong link to the previous grade standards.
Do we have numbers on that standard for comparison? The one the second grade one?
No, because this is the third grade test was not given in the second grade. Oh, I see. And we didn't get the second grade test this year.
Right, yeah. So like that standard, you said it correlates, like kind of a building block for it.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have numbers on the testing, compared just the way you did the 3G?
Well, I don't have anything to compare them to, though.
Because that's not a specific question, right?
But it's not on yet because it comes in the fourth quarter, right? Wasn't that come in the fourth quarter?
Of both second and third grades, yes. This is the fourth quarter standard. Maybe
Okay.
I'm not understanding.
I got it. I think it just
Because we didn't give a second grade assessment.
Oh, yeah.
This year.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
And that was it.
So yeah, exactly. So this is in the works right now. My next step with this process is on a district level that we did this with all the coaches. I'm going to touch base with every school, and we're going to go through their individual school level data. So I've already started to make those meetings. I have one tomorrow actually for the first school. So that is coming next.
So, because we're so lucky to have a wide community put down, right, for the new reading capability standards, we got one and the potential gap, right? So, I'm walking through, we know it's a gap. They didn't learn it last year because they weren't in school, right? We were sort of in crisis mode and we were, taught to some standards, but not all of them. What is happening right now, right? We know there are maybe 4 areas where you said that you need that. How does that happen when we teach a gap this year versus, doing that often? How do we do that?
So I think that's part of the beginning process of wrangling and assessing everything, and also working with the instruction coaches. And then in correlation, also bringing in Sarah Pearson and Phyllis and all of them are here to start diving into the areas that we need to target assistance and what supports do we need to provide and what plans do we need to put in place for basically intervening with the standards that we have.
So this basically goes back somehow, meaning reteach, because he's gonna boil it down for each school.
Each side by grade and content, yeah.
So reteaching, well, not reteaching, because sometimes they weren't taught at all, I mean, some of these, or not exactly what they need. So, they can find for by grade, by class, even really, evaluate further their additional skills. Okay, and timeline for that being done, obviously, between now and March.
Winter break.
Before the next.
Yeah, they're, I think all of them are hoping to have their plan ready to rock and roll before we go on the break.
So first quarter of next year is pretty crucial in terms of making any adjustments before the next cycle. So, thank you.
I heard if I could jump on that for a second, and I don't want to talk about specials at the same time, but specials usually is its own entity, they kind of do their own thing. This is a really excellent example of how you could really get into the art teacher and say, hey, maybe you guys should practice drawing this with this grade level. Because collaboratively, when you put it in art, it's going to maybe take that a little bit better.
That is an excellent thought. And to address, Madam President, your question, that's how I can really envision that as I sit down with the teams, talk to the computer with the teams. They really have two choices. They can either do something to try to eliminate or narrow the gap now, or by fourth quarter, when this standard is due to be taught, they know there's a gap. So they have to either spend more time on it or start a little lower in the standard, more line to second grade. So those are definitely things that we'll talk about. And now these next sets of slides. So this is some of the stuff we're doing at the district level. I want to go through what the schools are doing in the classroom level and student level with this data right now. And this is an example of one of the templates. And actually, I think most schools use this template. It was set up to just copy and paste raw score data by student into. So you can see the crosswalk at the top that has the standard and the item number, which is really that important. And then the ones and zeros are just whether the student answered the item correctly or incorrectly. And then once that gets dropped in, this spreadsheet does a few other things that auto-populate, like this by student. So if there's more than one item in the standard, it will average the items. This is just another thing that populates. This is a summary page for all the teachers. This particular grade has 4 teachers, then the whole grade level average, and then it'll also aggregate all the standard averages for the grade level. And there are some charts in here and other things. And Iowa schools, this is a useful tool for them, especially at the student level, to see which students are low in which standards, especially when they're assessed with multiple items. And then another thing that they're doing, because this is the district level data, they also have a lot of local data. So this is an example of what they call this is CFA document at one of the schools. And what they do is the grade level teams get together, they create these assessments to give all the teachers in the grade level, and then they score them and create proficiency levels in the document so that they can track individual students over time. And then this of course, they'll include district level data. This is last year's. And as you can see, we really like our colors here in the district. So those are some of the things the school is doing, some of the things that the district is working on right now as we go through the year. Oh, and let me say here too, once we get that winter data point in reading at the end of January, which I really hope we get, that will be a much more comparable assessment to last year. This one, since it's a new assessment given so much later, there are some nuances there, but the winter reading data point and the mid-math data point will be very good pieces of data. So then hopefully we'll have a state assessment. After the state assessment, we give our post-test. The post-test is the same as the pre-test, which they just took for comparison purposes. And it can be used for reflection, but probably the one most important is we use it to calculate academic gains or student growth. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit tonight, kind of how we do it. I won't get into too much detail about the data, but this is just sort of the general philosophy focused on attained versus expected growth. We divide the benchmarks up into 5 proficiency categories that are aligned to state assessment categories. And then we just assign points to students for movement within and between categories. Here is how I set the proficiency level cut points on the post-test. I matched the pre-test to the post-test, and then I analyzed the distributions by pre-test proficiency categories. So the students that were minimally proficient, what did their growth trajectory look like? And that's where I would define that's an expected gain. And I do that by looking at their standard deviations, which I'm not going to spend too long on this slide, but just to give you an example of just a snapshot of what the quantitative side of this would look like. I'm just going to take the top line, probably easiest to locate. This would be grade 3. Grade 3, the fall proficiency level is minimally proficient. 184 students were in that group. That's their average spring score. And I have the range, which isn't really meaningful, and then standard deviation. So that gives me a range, 33 to 68, that I know that cut point will be in. And this is just sort of a graphic of this. Here, the majority of the highly proficient, above average gets more points than below average. But at some point during that overlap, the highly proficient students start looking more like the proficient plus students. And then likewise, the proficient plus students tend to start looking more like the highly proficient students. So those would be groups of students that would switch proficiency categories. Here's our point outcome matrix. So now let me just show you how to read this real quick. Here's the fall proficiency level right here in the column, and then the row is the spring proficiency level. These would be students that started minimally proficient and ended in minimally proficient. And this would be the average for that group of students. Those that scored below it would receive 0 points, those that scored above would receive 2.5. So every student with 2 ballot scores get matched, proficiency ranges or proficiency levels are compared, and they're given a point value. And then at a class level, all the students that receive points would be averaged to come up with an average coefficient for the class. A little trial and error, and kind of a little bit arbitrary too, I guess. Those that lose proficiency levels, the more they lose, the more negative points they'll receive. Those that gain, the more they gain, the higher the points they'll receive. And these point values have changed over the years, and different categories have been added to just sort of even out the growth that we see in each group.
I know that because I see most of them, they take their own category or above, they got 1.5. So the minimum proficient, if you stayed minimum proficient, they get 2.5, which is basically for the highly proficient, they get the same, stay highly proficient, that's their stay up. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, are those correlated in any way, or how? Because everything else is, 1 to 1.5 seems much lower. So I will be saying is it is harder for a minimum proficient student to become partially proficient than it is for a proficient student, let's say, to become proficient.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and it's also, so the students in like the partially proficient, the minimally proficient categories that start there, they start as lower scoring students. So these midpoints were added to, and sometimes students don't make a lot of gain, but for that student, it is really a lot of gain, even though numerically it doesn't appear so. So we added this midpoint to give credit for partial categorical movement for those that started in that category but ended at the top, even though they didn't quite cross over into the proficient.
So you're saying is that if you start in the low or the middle, the names in the high, in the same category, is what you're saying.
Yep.
They maintain the.
Yep. So these midpoints here were just added to capture finer levels of movement. And that concludes everything that I had prepared for you tonight. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have.
So are you considering the fact that if the state does not lessen their test numbers amount of all the questions? And we come in and we find out that whether it's because we focus more on the correlation or whether it was truly time fatigue, are we going to consider taking that into consideration? Has that been mentioned, discussed?
Well, I think I know what you're asking. So one of the things that I will do, if we have a state assessment, which I'm pretty sure we will, the state is not talking about a waiver at all right now. These new tests will get correlated as they are to the state assessment. So it could be that we find out these shortened tests are just as good as the 60 or 55 item test. I would like to have more than 30 items, just because the distributions are a little difficult to deal with sometimes, but maybe we don't need to have a 55 item test.
And that's something you would take to the other state, and we have to stay here. Maybe everyone.
To go to the state to do that? I probably wouldn't do that. Like, show up, do, make public comment in a board
If
meeting?
we're finding that they're more proficient in the lower number tests, because we're focusing greater into that concept, then share your knowledge.
Well, yes, it is.
That's the moderate, all of, perfect timing.
Well, they say the standards aren't changing, so the expectations on the new assessment should remain the same. Yeah, it just moves to a new platform. I've been here. Oh, yes, we moved it to Pearson. Yep.
Is the district assessment, the correlation, was that versus the state average?
No, the correlations are run. So what I do is I match the student's benchmark score to the state's scale score in that grading content area. And the correlation is run based on that. So if it's a positive correlation, that means the higher the student's benchmark score, the higher the student's AZ merit scale score.
Okay. And then is the district assessment just a subset of the state assessment? It's just,
No, the district assessments, for the most part, I would say probably about 90% of the content that we have is written by us. We get through that item writing and revision process. We get teams of teachers in and look at standards and items or create items.
so why wouldn't we just use the state assessment or a subset of it? Why have a separate one for this district?
Well, we can't use the state assessment. The state assessment is a secure assessment that I've actually never even looked at the state assessment because of the level of security. So those get shipped to us with very specific counts. The books are barcoded. We have to.
I understand.
Got it.
Okay. the goal is to try to make it as correlate as well as possible.
Yes, we want these to be, my philosophy about our district benchmarks, is I want it to be as predictive as possible. You're welcome.
And historically, it's been pretty.
Yes,
close
yes.
for a long time, right?
Yep, and on the spring test, when those proficiency cut points are set, and I actually had those in the original version and thought, we don't have that current, but the 18-19 school year, almost every grade level was within 2 percentage points. There were maybe 2 that were outside that range. These, yes, those assessments are the highest correlated I've analyzed at the district.
And Jeremy, those are the same questions that I had and wasn't having to do. Brian, some of the information that I would like to start seeing going forward in relation to our equity work is the growth coefficients, once we know what those are by ethnic group and in each of the 5 divisions. We were provided that in the Diversity, Equity, and Empowerment Committee, and there was some, I think, pretty powerful information that was included in there. Obviously, we don't have that right now, we don't know what those numbers are going to be. What other, I guess, data would you, or analysis would you suggest we look at in trying to assess the equity gap?
In terms of academic data, because I'm trying to think, we've given what discipline data,
Yeah.
Attendance maybe even, I don't know if we did. But I can give you growth coefficients from last year, is that something we already did?
Yeah, I have 18 to 19. So,
Okay, I could put together 1920.
okay, yeah, you could do that. I think that would be helpful. And then I guess whatever other, we attended a equity data webinar from ASBA, and they had a section on digging into data, but they didn't have any specific pieces of information. They had kind of higher level, like looking at discipline within parties, things like that. So I'm just not sure what the most useful reports would be to kind of assess that information on achievement specifically.
Right, that's tough. I mean, I think in the lower scoring, the traditionally lower scoring subgroups, growth is always my go-to, because just because it might be a lower scoring subgroup doesn't mean progress is not being made. So growth is what I always will go to above proficiency. But what I'll do is I'll put together what'll be from 2019 proficiency results comparing districts in the other accountability subgroups. And then I'll send you last year's growth coefficients by subgroups.
So let me show you this. So this is what we have, this is what we were given. And what I think is the most interesting about this is that the minimally proficient students that are getting the interventions had very clear growth. But I think where the gap is in the partially proficient, they're not getting the interventions. And so we're seeing very little growth, especially in the African American and Hispanic subgroups, as opposed to, as you work your way up here. So I feel like there might be a gap here in these kids that aren't low enough to get all the interventions possible, but also like not high enough to kind of be doing everything. So this is kind of where my concern is right now. I feel like we're making this in this kid.
I see, gotcha.
So I don't know.
Is that ASBA numbers or those are?
No, this is our number. So yeah, this was math, and this was all of our students by subgroup. So Asian, African American, and white. This is the minimally proficient. They had a great amount of growth because of the interventions, but this partially proficient.
Just like the 504. There is a gap, I think. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's similar, and it's not just for. It's for all the kids,
Yeah, like that whole section was like, well, no, not for.
Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, so there's like, yeah, those are things that are kind of like we're even more, we're helping them in the activity standpoint, but not necessarily. So,
Brian, those are the, do you have this, do you have the growth since last year we didn't take it into the spring benchmark?
Yeah, because we use the 2 data points we had, so we went,
So it'll just be based on those 2 data points, but it may look a little bit different than the standard because we won't have a beginning and an end.
it might, the way that the proficiency cut points are set on those interim assessments, they're pretty comparable test to test. So comparing the proficiency levels rather than the percent correct is a fairly comparative analysis. So we could put that together for last year because we used the math formative and the fall assessment and then the reading, the December reading test and the fall assessment.
I don't have a question, Brian, but I would love for you to just give that some thought as to what you think we should be looking at in the areas of achievement when it has to do with equity, and give us your feedback on what you think might be useful information, not only for the board, but obviously for the teachers and everyone to try to help bridge that gap as we identify it. Okay, thank you.
Last question, just to kind of wrap it up. Purely from the data perspective, right? Not necessarily what, teachers do and all that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of the second step of this, but, in your opinion, based on what you've seen so far, and we only have one assessment to go off of, and who knows what's going to happen down the road, but do you think, based on what you've seen now and where you think we're going, do you think you're going to see the gap, right, that everybody is worried about? And if you do, will it be this year and we can, right, make it up? Or is it going to be like, okay, there's not going to be enough time, right, just between the end of this semester, we're going to see these same assessment numbers, gap, whatever you want to call it, next year as well? This is going to be sort of a pull down the check until we can finally get cut.
Well,
In our district, I know nationwide is different. In our district, what are you seeing in our data? What I'm asking you to kind of predict, I realize that.
well, overall, with this analysis that we're working on, with the assessment that we just took and comparing to standards and items in the past, overall, I don't see a gap. There are individual gaps in individual grade levels. The 1 and 3rd grade that to me was a gap. But listening to the coaches last week, it seems like where we're seeing the gaps, they're supporting standards. They're not critical standards and they're not essential standards. But overall, those individual items don't seem to be impacting overall scores. But if they are, I can't see that because I don't know how much higher we should expect these scores to be with this test at this time. So, but here's the thing about the winter tests, which I really need, and the February math test, is now what I can do is start to compare percent correct at grade levels and in subgroups. We can look at, compared to the December test last year, what do those percentages look like in January, which isn't that long down, especially with the winter break in the middle. And then even more so, we'll be able to assess any kind of gap at the end of February with that math test, because that will be the same math test taken at the same time of year. So we'll be able to compare those percentages to last year, and even the year before, actually, I think, for the last 2 years to see, compared to students in the last 2 years, what do our students look like now in those grades. So there's more assessment to be done. That I'll know more when we get that kind of data. And then, of course, at the end of the year, if we can take that post-test.
So obviously our plan A is that all of our kids are back in school and able to take these assessments as they normally would.
Yes.
What is the plan C, D, E? Well, I mean, it's, you know, a legitimate fear at this point because we're sitting here in December and our kids are not in school and, you know, we have no idea what January, February, March are going to bring. So like I said, our plan A is that all of our kids are going to be back in school and these assessments are going to go off. What is your plan C or D, right? We need this information, but if it's not, if we're not in a traditional environment, are there other ways to take these assessments?
Well, I don't have a plan for that right now, but
Okay.
I'm starting to think about one. One of the things we were able to do this year for the first time, with what I mentioned, is remotely assess. So we remotely assessed, I don't know the exact number, but it was somewhere around 800 or 1,000 students.
Okay.
And it went very well. I mean, I have to definitely thank all the test administrators that were trained and went through it for the first time with families. They were very respectful of the assessment environment. I mean, it couldn't have gone any better, but then I'd have to really talk to technology about this too. I don't know how reasonable it would be to try to remotely assess. I mean, it'd be close to 15,000 tests, and that would take a long time. Because one of the things we learned this time around was the fewer students in the remote test session, the better, because they're easier to manage, easier to answer questions, easier to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So just assessing, you know, half the class at a time, the assessment window would be a lot of days, but that might be a possibility. I'd have to definitely talk to technology about maybe looking at something like that.
Okay. And I don't know that that's the answer. I'm just saying, you know, we're now officially into the plan C, D, and E at this point for everything. So just throwing it out there that, you know, it's something we should be thinking about. If we want to have some assessment data, we may have to have some unusual way to get it versus, you know, the traditional environment, which I know totally messes up your, you know, ability to compare data to each other because, you know, environment is different and this whole year is going to be an asterisk, I think. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay. All right, moving on to item 1D. It's discussion on developing a board equity statement or resolution. And Kim Moran is going to walk us through this.
Give me one moment to get my notes. Okay, so I'm bringing back to the board tonight another draft of a proposed equity statement that also includes some goals that the Diversity Empowerment Committee put together. In the study session agenda, there are answers to all of the general questions that we want everyone who's presenting to the board to answer, and I am no exception to that. So you'll find in here how it aligns with our strategic plan. Is it a recommendation that's best for students? Yes, a defined commitment to continued improvement in the areas of representation and inclusion supports equitable outcomes and achievement. There's no financial impact specifically. However, the implementation of goals and plans may have a cost as the specific action plans are set. This is going to impact everyone in our LESD family and community. And the purpose of the request, again, is to discuss and receive feedback on an equity statement to be considered for formal adoption at our next board meeting. The primary differences between this draft and the draft that we reviewed previously are I received feedback from governing board members, Superintendent Gunning, as well as members of the Diversity Empowerment Committee themselves on what they would like to see, as well as from Anna Checky, who is the Executive Director of Inclusion Counts, who has been the facilitator of some of our Diversity Empowerment Committee trainings and is an expert in this field. So if you take a look at the proposed statement and goals, the top portion basically says why we believe that this is important to our district, how we intend to model this, and what our commitment will be. From there, you'll see that we're touching on each of our strategic goal pillars, or strategic plan pillars, student success, and some specifics regarding student success, equitable access, equitable culture, inclusive instruction, just, discipline, and representative leadership. Under the people pillar, we highly value our hiring practices, staff retention, continued training, and under service, meaningful interaction and increased involvement. Under finances and resources, our resource distribution and our resource allocation. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight that were changes from the previous draft is under hiring practices, based on some feedback from Amber Checky as well as members of the Diversity Empowerment Committee. We would like to make a strong stance here on our hiring practices. If we intend to move the needle from our current statistics of our subgroups in our staff, we would like to be able to make the commitment to build a diverse staff by posting every position to external candidates. Right now, we don't have, although the Litchfield district historically has, I guess, bragged about, our teacher retention rate of 92%, which is fantastic in some ways. If we want to have a diverse staff, we need to continue to hire from external sources, and we need to also potentially retain then those diverse candidates that are hired, and also promote those diverse candidates that are hired. Of course, always wanting to keep in mind the best candidate for the job, of course, but if we're going to change those statistics and those numbers that we have now and increase our representation in those subgroups that are not currently represented, we need to look externally in order to be able to do that. From there, after the finance resources on the second page, there is basically a paragraph that talks about how this is going to be an evolving process, and that through the work from the Diversity Empowerment Committee, we have set 5 goals. And these are just the summary level goals: equitable discipline, equitable achievement, continued learning, diverse curriculum, and diverse staff. The Diversity Empowerment Committee will, and they're working on that right now, come up with specific action steps and strategies for each of these goals, as well as who the responsible parties are and the timeframes involved with these goals. But this is just an overview. And then the other thing that was included in this draft that was not in the previous draft are actual definitions behind what each of these words mean: diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racist. The last sentence basically is just to be able to say that we're going to update this periodically. So I would anticipate, as we move through this process and we have different goals, if some of these have been achieved and are ongoing, others might be new goals that would come on next year. My vision is that the Diversity Empowerment Committee would be an ongoing committee now and in perpetuity. Please take some time to read through everything if you have not done so already, and I would be happy to answer any questions or take any suggestions for discussion.
I think this is great. Thank you very much for all the work that you put into it. I have read it. I don't have any specific questions. Thank you for calling out the differences, because it's similar in most places than what we looked at before. Just a couple of sort of clarification points. I know your work through the Diversity Empowerment Committee, that's where you got most of this information, but have they seen this document and sort of given their feedback or blessing on it? And is that where the changes came from that you referenced?
Yes, that is where part of the changes came from. So since our last meeting, I received some feedback, as I mentioned, from governing board members, and then Superintendent Gunning, I believe, received feedback from her admin council or one of her teams. Okay. And then I also spoke with Amber Checky, and then last week I got all of those changes in here, and then I sent this out to all the members of the Diversity Empowerment Committee last week and asked them, or maybe it was Saturday, for feedback in light of tonight's discussion. And so I did not receive a response from every member of the committee, but I did receive a few responses. I thought that was very important to me, that we have this committee and that we were able to put this committee together in the first place. And I thought it was very important to get their feedback on this statement because of the fact that this is not just a board statement. This is something that I hope, if this is adopted, that, or put into place, that every teacher and every potential new hire and at every level will be able to read this and know that this is our commitment and that we are intentional in this and that we really hope to see some cultural changes in the Litchfield district accordingly.
I would also envision this becoming part of our strategic plan as we move through this process to kind of solidify what this looks like. And as we update in the next couple of years, our strategic plan, and kind of work those together, because I think there's a lot of, very similar points. And I think it dovetails really nicely into what we're already doing. And maybe we just create some additional structure to that incorporates this. You guys have any questions or comments?
I'll start. Kim, I think this is stellar. It's fantastic. I like everything that's done in here. I have two questions. One, are you aware of any practices where we don't offer external applicants to come in, or where we're not advertising that? Okay, and I'd be interested to know what positions those are. And second, when the diversity training was here, and the two women, I can't remember the name of the organization that she was with.
Yeah, Anytime USA and Inclusion Counts, they're related.
They're related, okay.
Yeah.
So she gave us some numbers on Maricopa County as a whole. Have they brought anything to you that's a little bit more precise at the city level? Or have you seen any of those numbers, just out of curiosity?
Community-based, no, I haven't seen any of the breakdown of, basically what would be Avondale, Litchfield, Goodyear, Buckeye, our zip codes that we serve. I haven't seen any specific,
Anything come out of that?
Yeah. What I have seen though is our student population versus our teacher population, or our student population
for sure.
versus our admin population.
For
But
sure,
no,
for
I
sure.
haven't seen that, but I would imagine we could get that.
Yeah, well, especially with the census recently coming out, so we probably should expect some really good data off of that. Just when it comes out, we don't know. Those are the only things. Thank you for your time and commitment. It's really nice.
So Elaine, I'll comment on so when I took over, it was very important to me from an HR perspective to really stratify and solidify our recruitment process, because we were kind of all over the board. Sometimes it was an appointment, sometimes it was a interview process, sometimes it was only internal, sometimes it was external.
Okay.
From hearing from our teachers and our staff, they felt it was important to them to be valued, to have the opportunity first before going external. So what we did was we put in an internal process first, interviewed internal. If there wasn't a candidate found, then we posted external and went external. If it was a position that we felt like there weren't going to be internal candidates, then we posted them both simultaneously. But that's kind of the process. So that's the only thing. I think everything else looks amazing, but that will be a huge philosophy shift and change within our culture and our climate, is stating, because that's a strong statement, that now there's really no preference to be in the internal candidate. I mean, you might be still the best candidate for the job because of your internal knowledge, for sure, but that'll be a huge shift to the culture. I prefer the internal process and then going external. Just always preferred that, and that's what we've done in all the organizations I've ever worked in. But I think, I think that'll be a big shift of, I wasn't aware of that piece, even walking in tonight, as well as so that I know none of the leadership, nor probably any of our superintendent's advisory councils, none of them will know that. So it'll be kind of a after the fact shift.
Do you see a way to move the needle?
Sorry, I keep
With
magnetized here.
Do you see a way to impact the numbers that we have now without this?
I do, because I think that by promoting from within, I think what we have to start with, and I still think the main place to start is with our teaching staff. And I think that's important. I think getting in the numbers in student teaching, and even from that, and getting that information and connecting to the universities to get that flow in the recruitment process. of really starting to tap into. I know I connected Megan with another organization and group that's here locally, so that we can tap into those resources for a recruitment process. I think that's really important and valued. So I think those are pieces that we haven't really tapped into as much. We've been trying, but I think as we learn more and learn better ways of doing that, I think that we'll be better prepared and really starting to connect with all of the organizations and resources that are out there.
And I agree that I think not only with the addition of the statement itself, but then doing some of the plans that you're talking about, that will potentially move the needle for new teachers to our district.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we move the admin needle then?
I think the admin needle, I think when you have strong candidates, there's many of my people that I hired as student teachers that are now school psychologists. So I think when you have good people and you're working with them and you're encouraging them to excel and to grow, another intentional piece is going to be, how are we going to expand our admin training for future administration? And really making sure that we're going out and intentionally saying, you need to participate in this group. This would be awesome for you. You have the skills, you have the potential, and really encouraging and supporting in those ways.
What is the time frame from hiring a new teacher to becoming an admin, let's say? What is the time frame? I know it's not all the same, but from a first year teacher to when they would potentially be able to become an admin. There's certification process, there's all kinds of different things, but what is the time?
I think it's probably going to depend on which route they go, but I would say, some of our teachers that we hired as student teachers, like 3 to 5 years of teaching, then move on to, like, I have one that jumped from, I think it was she did 4 years of teaching and then jumped to school psychologist. I consider a school psychologist as a high level administrative position. We have Vanessa Zuniga is a perfect example. She was a student teacher of ours, probably 3 to 5 years. I was a teacher for 2, then went into instructional coach, and then went on to administration. So I think you got to consider that it takes about 2 years if they don't have their master's. So whatever time frame that you have to have 2 years at least under your belt to get your master's to then be qualified to be.
Right, I guess that's what I'm saying. So I'm thinking that probably a 3-year time horizon is unlikely because you have time to get your education and then, certification and then, whatever. So I guess the reason that I asked that is because if you start recruiting at the bottom, which is great, right? We haven't really been exploring those avenues. So I think we need to do that. I think the concern is that the time horizon is so long to only recruiting diverse candidates or hiring from outside at the bottom, not doing it without, we're looking at a 10-year time horizon before that ever actually reaches this room.
And that's going to just circle back and impact the hiring process in the first place. If they're not seeing themselves represented in district leadership, then they're not going to be as apt to want to come on, even with the things that we're trying to do, like putting the equity statement in place and doing different recruiting techniques. My real concern is the data, which is 85% of our certified staff are white, and 41% of our students are white. I want to move that needle, and I don't want to take 10 years to do it. I do want to hire the best candidates, and so I'm open to hearing ways to get there.
Right. Well, and I think you're talking about certified staff, and so I think that that's a perfect example of the pieces that we have to get put into place.
I think she's talking about more than just certified staff. I think it even has to be considered at the principal level.
Well, I'm definitely talking about admin for sure. So we've got 88% of our admin are white, and 41% of our students are white. So the admin, we only have 41 admin positions. Right. So, we don't have that much opportunity, but I think the opportunities that we do have coming up, again, we need to hire the best candidate, but we need to open it up so that we have the opportunity for potential diverse candidates to apply. Because if we only open it up internally, we're still narrowing that gap instead of opening that gap. So I guess what my feeling would be as a board member is that a shift in culture? Yes. Should that be viewed as a negative shift in culture? No. We should still know, and hopefully our folks who are internal would know that we're still going to hire the best person for the job. But adding some competition to the mix is I think a positive, because what if we get new leaders in who have more experience, not only with equity, but maybe other programs that would be more of an enhancement to our district rather than a detriment. Maybe it isn't someone who knows all the ins and outs of the Litchfield way, but someone who has done it a different way and might have even better things to offer or enhancements to offer, or be able to say, oh, I've done it this way, and it didn't work that way, and this is why. I feel like that should be an opportunity rather than a detriment to our hiring practices.
Do you think it's too radical to put something really specific in writing that says that certified and entry-level admin, which would be a principal level or coach level, correct? Goes to all external candidates, and then any higher level admin at the district level is then internal to start first, which would then in turn have more people that may want to come in at that principal level, knowing that then they will have an internal option for the next level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, I don't want to say let's do it here and not do it there, but how do we move that?
Well, I think there's no harm in saying that it's open to external candidates. I mean, we might not even get anyone who posts for the positions. Oftentimes, if you know they have someone that's already earmarked for it, you may or may not waste your time. If that becomes kind of what the word on the street is, I hope that's not how we would be perceived.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, any other, Tanya or
Yeah,
Melissa, any thoughts or
I just want to clarify, because we're saying that it's open to external candidates, doesn't mean that an internal candidate isn't going to be hired, right? I mean, it just means that you would interview or you would review resumes or whatever.
Well, you can't do that legally. You always have to hire your best candidate. You would have to be able to document why you selected who you selected, you know.
Oh, I'm not
Regardless,
suggesting
yeah.
that we would go to an external and then hire the internal. I'm just saying, the conversation seems like if we post externally, then that's going to be the better candidate, when in fact,
No, it's
potentially the
just,
internal candidate
yeah,
could win.
it's just a process that we've done. We've just posted internal. You typically interviewed internal for leadership positions first. If we don't have someone, then we post external.
Right, but what I'm saying is,
So it
it's
usually,
not taking away a chance from someone internally. I mean, they still have the same availability to get that job if they're the best candidate, right? I mean, internally.
they would. It just changes the shift of, so in a lot of the organizations that I worked in, it's just giving that value to, this is why you come to this organization. Like when I worked at GE and all the healthcare organizations, it was, you come to us at an entry level position and you'll always get the first go at it for any position as you promote. It's just giving value to the tenure and to your commitment to the organization. Like you've been there, you've stayed committed to that organization. So it didn't necessarily negate about diversity or any of that. It was very important to those organizations as well, but it gave a value. So they wanted you to be committed basically for life to those organizations. Like, we value you. If you're committed to us and you stay with us, in time, you will promote. Because you get, we value giving opportunity to our internal candidates first, and then we go external.
I don't disagree with that in theory. I just think that we're not in a position to be able to do that right now. Like GE has 400,000 employees, maybe. We don't. We have some very disparaging numbers that maybe they did or didn't have, I don't know. But we don't have the opportunity to change this unless we do something like this. We can't change these numbers unless we do something different. And I think I will be the first one to say I am proud every single year that we have the teacher retention that we have, and that we have the people, sitting in this room and others across the district that have been here for years and years and are committed to this place. I hope that wouldn't change. This is the same place, but I don't know that putting the best person in the job is a bad thing, whether that person is internal or external. I don't value the people that internal any less. But if there is a better candidate, and it also helps us achieve our equity goals and ultimately would be better for our students, I'm not sure. I understand there's a balance there. I'm not saying that we only, look at external candidates, absolutely not. But I don't see why we wouldn't even offer that as a choice.
So just throwing this out there though, by saying that we have to offer it to external people, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but in order for the needle to change, that means we need to hire external people and not our internal people for these positions, which means we will be hiring a lot more not internal people, which are internal people who have grown with us since they started student teaching are going to see that and see that they're losing their opportunity to grow with us and may move on and go to other districts where they have an opportunity to grow. That's just another thought to think about.
Yes, and that is a definite potential for this. I guess it just comes down to, do we value representation? Or do we value representation at least as much as promoting from within? Do we think, which I guess that really it boils down to, which do we think is better for students? If that's the decision that we're trying to make.
Tanya, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything everybody said is 100% valid. The reality is, to change the needle, there will have to be people coming from outside. The question is, does that create resentment with inside, right? And you get they just got hired, whatever, and I got passed over, and then that boils into the teacher and the support staff, and or maybe not, right? If we hire somebody who's stellar and amazing and fits, and also helps us with our inclusion, and that person is a game changer and is this incredible addition to our team, then we won't have that resentment, I don't think. However, if we do hire someone solely for the purpose of moving the needle, that's going to trickle down 1,000 levels. So my 2 cents is, as much as I'm a super loyal person and I value time, I value loyalty, I value all those things. I totally feel, fundamentally the same way, Jody, you do about that internal thing. I don't think that we can have really any real hope of making any of these commitments without opening to external. But that being said, that is if it is 100% the right person, not just to move the needle, because that will get ugly, that will get sideways, and that won't be fair to anybody.
And it will be obvious that that is going to be the case.
Right,
Yes,
exactly.
yeah.
So, again, I think if everybody's on a level playing field, if we put the right person in, it's going to work out one way or another. And I think that if you do get somebody who's amazing, as we do, and that's what we've always tried to do. If we do bring somebody externally who's amazing, then all those fruits will pan out. But again, only if that's the situation. And I think it will go ugly and sideways if it's not the right person. Fairly so. I mean, so, again, the reality is, you're right, there's no way to move this needle unless we're talking 15 years down the road without opening it up. I mean, I just don't see that reality. The other thing we didn't talk about very much, and I don't know that there's a huge avenue for it, but the other thing is looking at our internal candidates that can promote some of that diversity, some of our aides, and we've done that a lot. We have really encouraged a lot of our aides or people that didn't have that opportunity to move on and be certified and then to move on and be promoted within. So that's another area where I think we can really enhance and kind of win-win on that situation too. So we didn't really talk, and again, I don't know how much, again, we're not that big, frankly, how many people there are to really move those numbers, but I think that is something we certainly should look at. And I think we already do to some extent, but I don't know that we focus on the or we are as intentional, I shouldn't say focus, but are as intentional with that
Well, and I think monitoring the numbers of change. So even in our last three principal positions too were diverse. So I think
Yeah.
seeing recent change too is
Yeah.
something that's definitely,
Yeah,
I
and
think.
again, and when you have a pretty small number, you know, like you
Yeah.
said, how many positions are?
With 41 admin and 5 of those are, well, we only have Hispanic representation, 5 Hispanic, 40, or 36 white.
Yeah, so I mean, again, when you have a pretty small number, to be honest, it doesn't take too many numbers to change those percentages, right? So, you know, ideally, it's not like we're looking to change 50% of our, you know.
The
So-
only other thing that I would comment on is if this is the change, I think you need to have a caveat on that because there are planning positions that I would choose to post now to fill, to train in a future versus if I was going to just post external. Does that make sense? So let me
Similar
give you
to
a perfect example. Let's say I have, let's just go specific. Let's just say HR. If I was going to post it internal, of course, I don't have another HR person sitting around besides me. So I would post internally and have somebody train with the HR person for a year. If I'm going to post external, I'm not going to do that because I don't need, because what I would hire is another HR director or somebody of that qualification level from an external perspective. So I would wait a year.
Okay.
So those could be some situations that if you have something too black and white, then that would eliminate an internal.
But basically, what
Potential.
you're saying is you've already picked who that person is going to be. Because if you hire them internally for that job, you're not going to then open up the job in a year because you're hiring them for
Right,
that
right.
job.
It's a training
Exactly.
position.
You're training
Right.
them for.
Right. But
Right.
I guess, I don't know, I guess I don't.
So does that make sense? I
Yeah,
wouldn't,
I mean,
I couldn't post it. If I posted it external, I'm going to get other HR directors that would apply. So that's not going to make sense for them to start next year and sit with my HR director for a year. They're already highly qualified. They only need to train maybe a few weeks with her.
So why wouldn't you do that? I mean, if we could hire someone and they were already highly qualified, why would you need someone to train for a year?
I'm talking about an internal candidate. If I was going to do something that,
No, but really what you're saying there is
I-
we would
I-
be
I
paying
think I
someone to be training for a year. That doesn't seem like the best financial decision either. If we could hire someone from the external, that we would have one less admin position for a year.
could, but it would also eliminate any internal candidates.
But I think what we're saying here, Jody, is we're okay with that because if we're gonna move the needle, we're gonna need to hire some external candidates. So maybe a position like, that's very specific, like an HR position would be the perfect opportunity to do that. To interview and of course, get the best candidate possible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so you're saying because we don't have,
I guess,
it's not like a teacher and admin where you already have people that are trained in that, so
Right,
you could
right.
hire them at any point in time. This is
So
a
I think of it-
specialized job
right.
and there's no one else in this district that is specialized for that position.
right, they have maybe characteristics and components of it, but
Right.
maybe
But
not
can't
all of
step
it.
into the job.
Um,
Do it.
And those positions like that, or like a finance position, those kind of things, those are really hard, tough positions because they carry a lot of liability. So you want to have somebody that you know can do it and know that have, rather than, I don't know, it would be, if it was an external candidate, I have to have a lot of information, so then you would. So for me, knowing somebody and knowing someone's ethics and their ability and their skills is really, really important to me. So this eliminates any flexibility with any of those types of things, which if that's the route, that just is a different route than, I like flexibility for different pieces, not to say that on other typical positions are not posted, both internal or external.
I guess
Just
the
saying.
other thing that I like about, and maybe there's a way to word it slightly differently, but what I like about being able to say that we've at least posted positions to external candidates is if the needle doesn't move,
Right.
we can at least say that we tried
Right.
to move the needle. Because in every case, I would hope, to your point, Tanya, that we're going to hire the best candidate. And so whether that person is diverse or not, we want the best candidate for the position. And so if we're not posting it externally and we're only promoting internal, that we already know what our demographics are, I just don't see how we can move it. So I feel like we can't expect the needle to move, but at least if we open things up to external candidates, we have that opportunity. Whether it ends up moving or not, when we're coming back and looking at your evaluation and we're looking at where we are as a district and we're looking at the data and everything that we're going to try to look at now through this equity lens as well, we can at least say that that was an effort that we made, an earnest effort that we made to do that.
And I totally get that, but I also then worry, and I'm fine with posting internal and external. It'll be a culture shift and we'll have to communicate. I just want flexibility because I don't want my person to retire and then because I will not, for certain positions, I'll leave it open for as long as I need to. And I would just hate to be without anybody. And then it's basically.
But I guess that's just how the jobs work. I mean, that's just how hiring and retiring and stuff like that works. And I think the opposite of what you're saying is we're earmarking positions for internal people. And that's, I think, what we're trying to get away from, because that's not necessarily what's best for students, right? I mean, that might be what's best for someone's individual career, but it's not what's best for students.
It also starts a domino effect too. Because then you're opening, if you're filling, you know what I mean? When upper level positions move on, it's that trickle effect of how you see the different people rise up too.
Well, and if they're the best person for the job, then they should get it. Absolutely, hands down. I mean, if you have two equal candidates, the internal candidate should get it every time. I mean, I value loyalty.
I'm just saying on the,
that,
like that perfect, that example.
High level leadership is where she would rather start at the internal process and that lower.
Well, or just to have
the known quantity, right?
Just to have
So
flexibility.
When you hire somebody external, when you have a position that literally touches every single person in the district, it's tough to not have a known quantity, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
right.
You know, not so much that it's a earmark situation, but it's a known quantity that you know you're not going to get burned. And, you know, with a teacher or other admin or principals even, that touch is smaller, right? So like for HR, I mean, this is what I'm feeling. I don't know that this is accurate, but to me, it seems like it's a known quantity. And if you hire somebody, you know, we've all been there. You see someone who looks amazing on paper and they interview incredibly. We've had this with other in the past, right? And in real life, not so much, right? And it took a lot to get away from that. And so, again, it's a known quantity in that situation. I don't think that really flies all over.
Right,
but,
exactly. I just want to have flexibility because for a perfect example, Danielle, if I'm sitting and interviewing and let's say it's a year from now and a principal interviews for that job, they're not going to be the best candidate. There's no way. So they have no chance.
Which job are you talking about?
Like for the HR director job.
Oh,
there's no way without training that they would even have a chance if another HR director walked in to interview. They're just not going to have even an HR executive or assistant director. There's no way they could compete. So then I'm eliminating, basically I would be eliminating any internal candidates. So, I mean, I guess you could see it either way. You eliminate external candidates if you offered the opportunity for internal. I like a little gray so that when a certain circumstance comes up that I have a little flexibility, especially in some sensitive positions. So
I understand that, and I'm not opposed to some flexibility. However, this brings me back to, and I was on board when you were hired, but we know there was not necessarily an open hiring and promoting process that used to occur in this district. And when you say you want flexibility, it gives me an uneasy feeling because I feel like you as the superintendent want to manage certain positions the way that you want to manage the positions. And it isn't that that's outside your realm because you are the person who is tasked with doing the interviewing and recommending to the board who you want to hire. I just I'm having a hard time reconciling that with this equity piece. I don't need to answer, because it wasn't a question, that's just a
Right.
statement. So maybe the best course of action right now is if we can maybe think about this, and if you and I can talk, maybe, and you can talk to your admin council or whoever, and you get some feedback, and if you and I can talk maybe before next Tuesday, and then we can revamp this if we find a way to kind of meet in the middle, or come up with something creative, or if any other board members have any feedback on that, you can get that back to me, then I can put a revised draft in the agenda for the meeting next week.
And I agree with that. If I can just say one thing kind of as that meet in the middle, if it really is for only very specific positions, could we leave this as it is? And as you've done with other things, you come to us and said, this is the situation. I want to hire this person. I need to, I need to change their pay scale. I need to, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's flexibility in that, but it's not in this. It's in the individual. I want to do this. I want to do that kind of thing for those sensitive positions versus leaving this open and not really committing to what we said we're going to commit to. Because I think because we have to review HR issues all the time at our board meetings, could we go that route? So you still have the availability and the flexibility to recommend those things. It's just on a position by position basis versus
The policy.
right. I mean, this isn't a policy, but a recommendation, a district recommendation. Is that a possibility?
I would like to say that I agree that there are some positions that I think should be internal, absolutely. I agree there are positions that I believe we should absolutely open up. I would like to go back to what you said about it being a big shift for our community and for our thought process. And this is clearly why we do this. We need everybody on board. We need our teachers, we need our staff, we need our parents, we need everybody on board to get over this hump, which is rampant in our country. And it does go back to what is best for the students. And the best for the students is people that are at their face, the teachers and the principals and the coaches and the PBIS people that these kids are seeing every day, seeing those peers in front of them, which I think correlates to those positions being external, for sure. But it definitely is about us all getting on the same page and understanding the necessity for it.
And I think they're all important pieces. I mean, I don't think that valuing tenure is any different than valuing diversity. I think they're all very important. And I don't think, I mean, my statements, I valued diversity greatly. And I think it's been something that we've been working on and we've noticed right away.
There's something that you guys can come up with together that finds that in the middle for everyone to agree.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, we wouldn't invest the amount of money and time into training our teachers with PD and everything else that we do if we didn't value that long-term commitment that they have to our district. So I agree with that 100%.
Okay, so next steps are we are going to bring this back for potential adoption at the meeting next Tuesday. Okay.
Yes, and if anyone has any additional feedback, reach out, please.
I just have a question.
Yes.
How many people, besides us here, how many people have you gotten feedback on this from? This is a big statement we're gonna put out there. It's a big shift, right, for our thinking. How much buy-in have we gotten from our community, our staff, how much buy-in are we getting from them before we just make this statement?
Really, the primary feedback has been from the people in this room and the Diversity Empowerment Committee. So the equity statement is something that is generally made at the board level or at the admin level. I guess I'm not sure what kind of feedback you would expect to get from this, or.
Well, Jody has several committees. I mean, there's a big change possibly with this hiring thing. So without even telling people that we're talking about this and getting any kind of feedback from anybody, who have you brought this to, since we get it from an admin level? So what admin has been a part of?
We just did the executive team, but we were at the very high level of the statement, not into the, we haven't talked through Like I see those things as goals, you know, and
You mean we don't have a teacher survey on this?
Well, I mean, I don't know that, I'm not saying we need that, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying like.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a good, it's an interesting question
Right.
because the
It was like the high
perspective
level
is
stuff
that,
and then-
you know, it is similar to our strategic plan, and that was a very different process, obviously, than, you know, a much bigger deal and a longer term process. But ultimately, this, you know, the vision and the direction of the district resides with the 5 people in this room. I mean, this is our responsibility to decide. I think getting feedback, of course, we always do that. We always want to, you know, go to people and ask their opinions and things like that, and whatever we need to do that. But I think this, you know, there are parts of this that are going to be really easy and widely accepted, and everybody's ready to jump on board. I think probably a good portion of this, I hope. I mean, I think our community is in that place. I think there are probably a few points that, you know, are going to be more difficult for folks to get on board, maybe specifically our staff on this hiring process and maybe some of the other things. I think, you know, between now and next week, I guess us as board members just really need to think about, yes, it's probably going to be difficult for a teacher or for an admin to say, yes, I'm totally on board with potentially, you know, having more competition for my next job. That's going to be hard, right? That's a hard thing to say. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need to happen. It just means that it's going to be a hard thing. So I think that's what we need to think about is what is best for the district, what is best for our students, and then how to nuance this document to make it fit and to make it work. I think to me that's going to be the sort of the toughest part, but I think we all know, just like with the strategic plan, with everything else, there are going to be people that do not agree with this. And I think we just have to say, are we committed to moving the needle? Yes or no? If we are, we're going to have to do hard things. This is not easy. None of this is easy. I'm sure the work in that equity group was not easy, right? I mean, some of the conversations that y'all had. So I think we just need to do our best to create a nuanced document that represents the best that we can about what we want this district to be, and then realize that it is going to take some small shifts and some big shifts in our district culture to get there.
And we can update this also. So, I mean, it's not a policy that's going to take, you know, revisions and revisions. Like that's why I'm saying, like, it's still open for discussion, obviously, between now and next week. And even after next week, if we approve it, we can still make changes to it at that point. Part of it for me is the timing. According to Amber from Anytime USA and Inclusion Counts, just having a statement like this available on our website will potentially open up the people who are applying to our open positions and will give them a sense of comfort before they ever even walk through our doors. And so I feel like the sooner we can do this, if we're actually committed to it, the better, because that's going to start making that change. And not only for hiring, but also if you read through here, some of the things we're saying about our students and accepting our students for who they are and making sure that they're represented and included in our curriculum and those types of things. It isn't just about the representation of the teachers and the staff. There's a lot in here that's about students and our resources as well, equitable allocations and distribution, you know, to fund that also, I think is really important.
And I was gonna say, honestly, I think that most of our people that would be applying internally for these jobs know they're good at what they do and they know they're valued, otherwise they wouldn't be applying for the job. I think opening it up and, you know, creating more competition, maybe a little bit, I don't know, maybe a rough turn to start with. But honestly, I think most of the people are confident and competent enough that they can stand a challenge. And again, even if they don't get the job, like somebody applying internally, whatever, if we're bringing somebody incredible to the team, I feel like all of our teachers, all of our people that are potential principals appreciate a good team member. And if they're not the one chosen, and I've seen it in people that didn't get jobs, you know, throughout, because I remember I was here back in the appointment days and the who knows what's happening days. Believe me, very loosey-goosey, and nobody knew what was going on frequently. And even then, if somebody was appointed over somebody else, I saw a lot of people accepting when it was a strong candidate. And anytime a strong candidate was there, we were all part of the same team. And, you know, if you didn't get appointed captain, whatever, if that is a valuable number to our team member, most of the people truly value that. At least that's my experience I've seen in the 6 years I've been doing this. And as a parent and the daughter of a teacher and, you know, all those things. So, I do think it might be a little rocky, but I almost feel like, I think we're underestimating some of our candidates a little bit. For some of these, now again, I see your point in certain situations, it's kind of totally different, but as an open thing, and I think it's, you know, bringing in blood, and if we're able to move that needle, and truly, like we said a bunch of times, there is no other way. It's gonna happen. I mean, I do think we need to look closely at our promoting within and use, you know, and the diversity piece as well. I mean, I think we need to, you know, make that intentional, just like anything else. But again, and I'll say it 1,000,000 more times, if we don't choose the best person, it will bite us, no matter what. And if we choose the best person, I think it's gonna end up great. And hopefully that helps, you know, bring in other things, but we have to do it, again, always looking at what is best for the child. And the best person in the room, regardless of whatever it is the person that should have that job. And if we stay true to that, we'll always win. I mean, I think that goes, you know, within even the people that don't get that spot. So I think we all value that.
Yeah.
We all have the same.
I think, Melissa, kind of what you were thinking or feeling too, that is a little bit different, is that typically the board has approved something very high level, and we as a district create the how.
Right.
And this is creating the how.
Right. No, you're right.
So that is a different setting to just kind of to think about, because that is different than how we've done most of everything that we've done in the past is, you know, usually it's a high level and then bringing back to you how we're going to do that and how we'll accomplish it. This does it basically all. So.
Which is why I'm asking, tell me how. I'm more than open to change this wording or, you know, I think hiring practices need to be part of this people pillar when it comes to equity, and building a diverse staff. So yeah, I'm.
Well, and I think if we're looking at diverse, I mean, there's another, I mean, how many men do we have working in our district?
Oh,
versus, I mean,
agreed.
our student population, so we can't just be looking at.
Agreed, gender, ability, sexual orientation, I'm all for it, yes.
Like our boys don't see hardly anybody that looks like them, so.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Okay. Okay, so I think we have kind of the baseline, right, of what we're going to do. Please submit any feedback on this specifically as you have it over the next week. Kim will work with any of those, and then we will have another discussion and potential adoption or what have you next Tuesday. Okay, so I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Oh, I motion to adjourn.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.